Voters of color will be key to any Democratic victories up and down the ballot in November, and the new NBC News poll has good news for the Harris-Walz campaign. Vice President Harris leads Donald Trump among black voters by 78 points. That's a dramatic change from July, when President Biden was atop the Democratic ticket and had a 57-point advantage. Among Latino voters, Harris leads Trump 54% to 35%, a 19-point margin, which is very similar to the margin Biden had over Trump in July. Joining me now, Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of the Black Voters Matter Fund, and Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. Thank you both very much for being here. Maria Teresa, you are here on set with me, so I'm going to start with you. The NBC News poll says that the support for Vice President Harris now is similar to what it was for Biden in July. Is that what Voto Latino is finding through its own polling and surveying? Not
at all. If anything, what we saw her going into the convention, Biden before the convention, when he was on top of the ticket, it was 47, 38, 17 for independents. So what we saw going into the convention, she was at 60%. Trump was 60. Trump was at 29, and RFK was at 7%. What we found so surprising about that poll was that we expected the independents to come home to the Democratic side. We expected that. We didn't expect them to be the Trump voters going on to Kamala Harris. And we're seeing this. This was 2,000 voters in key battleground states. So we're talking about North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. And that was before the convention bump. And we're seeing that shift even more among young people. People are very enthusiastic. And I think that one of it was, first, they were trying to figure out who she was in defining her, but they liked her backstory. But now she's talking about policy. The biggest issue, for example, for a young voter, black and brown, between 18 and 29, is housing. So it was not a surprise that she came out with that really ambitious housing policy of building affordable housing while giving first-time homeowners $25,000. That didn't come out of the blue. That came out of research that we've been producing and other organizations talking specifically about what voters need to hear.
And Cliff, among African-American voters, are you seeing that same spike in interest and spike in support that Maria Teresa was talking about among Latino voters?
Yes, definitely. And to be clear, you know, we've been saying that this would happen for a year now since people first started asking about some of these polls. And we were saying, look, the closer we get to the election, the more people become clear about the choice, the more that people start receiving some information about the candidates, then Biden and now Harris, that you would start to see these poll numbers and these favorabilities increase. And that's exactly what's happening. Some of that increase, a big part of that increase that we're seeing is that energy of the switch at the top of the ticket, and it's focused on Kamala Harris itself. Some of it is just a function of, look, as we get increasingly closer from 70 days to 60 days to 50 days to 40 days and closer, people are getting more information. And to Maria Teresa's point, they're learning more about their policies, more about the housing policies, more about the tax credit policies, right? And so as these conversations continue, I expect to see those poll numbers for Vice President Harris continue to go in the direction that we've been seeing it go for the past 6 weeks.
Now, one of the things that Black Voters Matters is doing, you guys now have a $15 million program in the battleground states. It's going to span nearly a dozen of these states. A voter canvassing operation aimed at increasing black turnout in swing states and the Deep South. And interestingly, the mobilization effort including a focus on black men. Now, one of the things that's been driving me crazy is this notion that black men en masse were going to be going and voting for Donald Trump. What are you seeing on the ground, and how serious is the potential of erosion? Is there erosion of black male support for the Democratic ticket?
Right. No, we're not going to see any major shift. I don't even think a minor shift. In fact, I'm still believing that it's actually going to go in the other direction, that Trump will actually get less support from black voters overall, and in particular from from black men. So no, some of the things that we've been hearing, and again, we've been hearing it for a year now, that the sky is falling, and that simply isn't matching what we hear out in the community. There's always a concern about whether or not some demographics of black voters might decide to stay at home. But again, I think that the more that people hear about these policies, one of the things that we keep hearing from some black men is, well, I don't know what she's done or what the Biden-Harris, what they've done and what they're going to do for black men. And again, as we have conversations around things that they've done or things that she's proposed, like the economic policies, or around the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that she co-sponsored, right? Or any of the other things, insulin costs, which impacts black men disproportionately. As these discussions continue and as they start to even add on, I wouldn't be surprised if they add on another policy or two that is uniquely targeted to black men. Then again, I expect that these polls, these numbers are going to keep going in the direction that they're going. And the last thing I'll say very quickly is that in some of these polls, some of the polls haven't been done fully after the debate. I believe that debate performance, where she not just beat him substantively, but when you think about the machismo that sometimes speaks to some segments of black men, the way that she dismantled him and made him look small, made him no longer look like Marlon Brando in The Godfather, but instead made him look like Fredo. That has an impact on black men that are now looking at him like, nah, you lost some cool points, and I'm not going with you.
That's a great analogy there. So, Maria Teresa, it's one thing to go out there and knock on doors and say, hey, who are you going to vote for? Mm-hmm. It's another thing to get those folks then, if they're not registered, to register to vote. And I'm going to point out for folks, you know this data point very well. You facilitated 36,000 registrations in the 6 months leading up to July 21st. That's the date that President Biden stepped out of the race. In the weeks since, Voto Latino has registered 120,000 additional voters. Those are people who now can vote. Talk about that and how significant that spike in registration is.
So think about the way we do our work as the stock market, right? And so all of a sudden, the moment she came on top of the ticket, the stock market went hot. They all wanted in. And the folks that were registering, disproportionately, 70% of them are under the age of 25, and 60% of them are women. In my 20 years, I've never seen such enthusiasm among young people who are listening to what she has to say and getting in the ring. And the reason that is significant, in a place like Arizona, where Biden won by 10,400 votes, there are 163,000 Latino youth that have turned 18 since the last election, more than 10 times. We personally have registered over 13,000 people, so already over the margin of Biden's victory. And what we're trying to tell people is that it's one thing to listen to the polls, but watch voters' behavior. The fact that there's record volunteers, the fact that people are spending their hard-earned cash donating to her campaign, the fact that young people are saying, you know what, I wasn't interested in, but now I want in and I want to volunteer. This is a whole new ballgame. And it's exciting because people want to be part of this democracy.